Close was a bustling town. It was filled with all sorts of different people. Artists who owned studios, and writers who sat in cafes. Carpenters and mechanics, dancers and singers and actors and teachers. There were people with all kinds of interests, people with passions and big dreams. They made Critter Close a wonderful place to live. But the best people of all lived and worked at the Critter Farm. During the day, people were often seen coming in and out of the barn, hauling hay and buckets of seeds, baskets brimming with eggs and glass bottles of milk. They were constantly hard at work until the sun set and out came the moon. The sky turned a deep blue and shining stars flecked the great canvas high above. The humans would retreat to their comfortable beds, just as the animals shook the sleep off their fur and ruffled their feathers. The animals were all very sociable and would often gather around the barn where no one could hear them. All the animals, that is, except one little mouse named Finch, who liked to spend the night having his own adventures. Finch loved his friends very much, but his nighttime strolls were the best part of his day. Each night, he found a new smell or a new curious thing to grasp his attention. One night, from where he lay, tucked up in a bundle of hay, Finch smelled something. The scent was so strong that he opened his eyes. He burrowed through the hay until he found the door, which he had carved for himself into the wooden wall of the barn. First, he poked the tip of his pink nose out into the great outside. His white whiskers trembled as his nose twitched left and right, picking up a scent so delicious his stomach gave a great rumble of delight. His nose still firmly in the air, Finch put one white paw out into the night, and then a black one shortly after, bringing his whole small body out of his little home. His eyes remained closed as he took in the scent, grasping at different aromas each time he breathed in. When he finally opened his eyes, he had a course already set up in his mind. Within his mind's eye, Finch could see the scent, as if it were a tantalizing cloud of white smoke beckoning to him. The imaginary smoke drifted high up into the air and trailed down the streets. It curved through back roads, spiraling past homes with all the lights off, before finally ending up at a building Finch visited at least several times a week. With a flick of his tail, Finch reared himself forwards and scuttled down the cobblestone path, away from the barn, and out along the roads leading towards the heart of the town. His nails echoed along the quiet street as he ran, and he relished the soft sound as a light breeze blew his fur back. Finch smiled as he raced towards his destination. He had just reached the gates at the entrance of Critter Farm when he heard something. The whooshing sound of a friend flying high above him. "Slow down," said the voice. "What's the rush? Are you going to the party too?" Finch recognized the deep, velvety voice of his friend Droll, the brown barn owl. Droll was often the first to arrive at the evening gathering. He always had tales of things he'd seen the humans doing that day. A couple of nights ago, Finch had been late arriving back at the barn. He only managed to catch the end of Droll's story about a festival that took place during the day. Finch heard of the flashing coloured lights, the pink edible clouds they call candy floss, and booming laughter. And he made sure to leave earlier the next evening to see if the festival was still going on. He wanted desperately to try a pink cloud. Unfortunately, Finch had missed the humans, but he did end up finding bits of the pink cloud scattered on the ground. It tasted sweet and cloying, nothing at all like he thought a cloud might taste like. Finch had brought some back with him to the barn, looping his tail around what he could carry and dragging it through the streets. Only some of his friends tasted it, and only a few of them could bear the sharp sweetness. But Finch didn't mind. There was more for him to eat. Now, as he set off on another evening adventure, Finch called up to the owl. "Don't you smell that?" he asked. Finch's voice was a small squeak, but somehow Droll managed to hear him from all the way up above. "It smells like heaven," said Finch. Droll stopped flapping his wings. He gracefully landed on the wooden gatepost, his claws curving around the post to keep a firm grip on it. Then he turned his head up to the air, the tip of his beak pointed at the moon. From where he sat far below, Finch thought that Droll's eyes had captured the moon itself. The owl's large saucer-like eyes sparkled in the night with a vibrance he had only ever seen the moon itself hold. But it seemed that Droll couldn't smell anything. "I must be going," said the owl. "I'll see you at the party later, Finch. Don't be too late this time." And with that, Droll spread out his large wings and took off into the sky. Finch paused for a moment, watching him fly into the barn before he turned around and continued on his journey. The route he took most nights led through the centre of Critter Close. When he took this route, he gave himself plenty of time to explore the little things the humans had left behind during the day. Sometimes on these scavenging trips, Finch would bring home little treasures. Several nights ago, he brought back a purple pen that stained one of his paws. Before that, he found a glinting glass shard that showed his reflection. All of these things he stored away in his small corner of the barn. Tonight, though, he felt like taking another route. He paused in the middle of the road. The asphalt was still warm beneath his paws from the hot sun earlier in the day. Finch stood up on his back paws and closed his eyes once more, tilting his nose up towards the sky. His whiskers trembled as he sniffed the air. This time, a different route appeared in his mind. One that led through the woods and snaked past the winding river before rejoining the other side of the town. Happy with his recalculation, Finch dived forwards into the quiet woods. He didn't know what the woods looked like during the day, but he imagined the area to be full of people. There were so many well-worn paths and footprints, he could only imagine the number of people that trod through the woods. He understood why, though. The woods at night was such a magical place. He imagined it must be even more beautiful during the day. At night, he could hear crickets chirping, the wind whistling through the branches, and leaves rustling. Nature was creating its own little symphony. And Finch had the privilege of being seated in the front row. Sometimes he paused there, perching beneath a tree, just listening to the many sounds of the woods. Tonight, though, he was lured on by a scent so delicious he could practically hear it calling his name. But just then, he heard something else. "My friend," called a smooth and silky voice from behind him. "Where are you going?" Sookie, the town's resident black fox, curled her tail around her slender body. Her green eyes flashed in the darkness as she padded over to Finch in the middle of a well-worn path. "Ah," said Sookie, "I see it's another nighttime adventure." Sookie often bumped into Finch on these nights. Sometimes she too liked to explore by herself, finding new and magical things. Most times, though, when they bumped into each other, it was when Finch was heading somewhere else and Sookie was leaving home to saunter down to the barn. Sookie was kind and warm, and she was smart and very patient. Sookie was possibly Finch's best friend. He didn't tell everyone of the things he saw and tasted, or the snippets of human conversation he occasionally heard. But he always told Sookie. She had tasted the pink cloud with him, and had helped him wash the purple ink off his paws. And she had flashed the moon's bright reflection off his glass shard to create rivulets of silver light in the barn. "You have the gleam of scent in your eyes," said Sookie, with a knowing smile. "A heavenly scent," said Finch. "I just know it's delicious." His stomach grumbled on cue. Shaking out her silky fur, Sookie nodded her head. "If you can," she said, "bring me back something to eat." And with a wink, she took off in the direction Finch had come from. Finch waited until he could no longer hear the near silent patter of Sookie's footsteps, treading over fallen twigs and crunchy leaves. Then he stood up on his back legs again and strained his pink ears. They twitched slightly as they sought out the sound of the lazily moving river. Once he'd found it, Finch pounced off in the right direction. Though he loved the river, he didn't always stop by it. He hated getting wet, and on days when the river wasn't feeling so lazy, he often got splashed. Besides, Finch didn't always get on with the creatures that sat around the river. You see, not all the animals in Critter Close liked to go to the barn in the evening. Some animals found their own little comfortable spots, and they would rest there. That wasn't a problem, as the barn wasn't for everyone. Finch liked a lot of the animals that didn't go to the barn, such as Peter the hare, who lived near Sookie. Peter didn't like leaving his home, and sometimes he would get too nervous to socialise. But he liked Finch, and he liked it when he visited. Then there was Alice the robin. She preferred sleeping at night time and coming out during the day. Larry the toad, though. Finch didn't always get on with him. Larry really liked the water. He loved being immersed in its cooling waves, splashing in the muddy ponds nearby and making homes in green mulch. It all made Finch wrinkle his nose. He didn't care how others spent their time or where they choose to live. He just didn't want to try out their ways of living. Finch liked the way that he did things. He liked his adventures, his home, and his friends. Finally, Finch reached the river. It wasn't rushing at a high speed tonight. It was gentle and soft. Little bubbling sounds drifted up from far below, like the river was wishing Finch a happy hello. He smiled at it, watching as the leaves that fell off the trees were carried away somewhere else. Sometimes, Finch felt the urge to hop on a leaf, just to see where the water would take him, to find out what was on the other side of the river. But he truly hated getting wet, and he felt like no adventure was worth that. Then, Finch heard a voice. "Still don't want to take a swim?" the voice asked him. It was Larry the Toad, of course. He sat on the edge of the river, droplets of sparkling water dripping off him. Finch took a small step backwards, away from the toad. He hoped he didn't notice. "No, Larry," said Finch. "You know I don't like getting wet. Besides, I'm much too small for that big body of water." Larry scoffed. He was only a bit bigger than Finch, and he was okay in the water. Finch sighed. They had the same conversation almost all the time. It was like a script that the pair had memorized. But this time, Finch decided to alter the script. He explained that he was heading somewhere and needed to get there quickly. He didn't have time for a swim, but maybe another time. Toad squinted his eyes as he stared at the mouse and then shrugged. "Fair enough," said Larry. "Well, when you're ready, my friends and I can give you some swimming lessons." Finch nodded and sighed again before he took off along the river, leaving Larry far behind. As Finch followed the winding river closer to town, the smells began to dance on his delicate taste buds. He tasted the tanginess of lemons and something sweet like a strawberry. Something a little nutty filled the air too. Finch sped up, zooming out of the woods until finally he could hear the scampering of his nails against the stone path once more. He spotted his shadow following behind him as he weaved in between tall street lamps, and lights turned on in some of the homes around him. He didn't mind the lights, but darkness and quiet corners were where he felt most comfortable on these adventures. Finally, Finch spotted the building he loved the most in town. The lights were all off, and the door was firmly closed. But there, in front, was a box with his name on it. The human who worked there had spotted Finch many months ago. She seemed to like him, as most people and animals did when they met Finch. And so, she started leaving little presents for him a couple of nights a week. Finch bounded over to the white box. Then he paused, taking a moment to breathe as the excitement fizzled inside of him. He reached out a paw and gently patted at the lid until it sprang open. And there inside were several little treats collected in the box, all just for him. There was a yellow cake that he knew would taste of lemon, then one that was cream-coloured with a sticky red thing on it that he knew would taste of strawberry, and another that had little orange carrots on it, which he hoped would be something nutty. Thrilled with the spoils of his late-night adventure, Finch licked icing off his paws and then wrapped his tail around the box. The human always gave him a box small enough for his little body. With the box properly secured, Finch took off into the night, heading straight for the barn and all of his animal friends. There, he would share his sweet delights before padding off to bed and beginning a whole other adventure the next night.